The internalized racism is basically everything we take in from the external society and culture, and it becomes part of our own mindset. It's how we think about ourselves, how we think about others who look like us, and how we think about people who don't look like us. And the way we do that is different depending on how we're situated racially in this society. As a white person, a lot of times the way I internalize messages are just sometimes believing a lot of the dominant cultural images that I've been subjected to. Like in school, I read about, most of the heroes I read about were white people. And when I look at commercials or movies, the images of beauty are people with straight hair like mine. And so I begin to internalize those messages as if I'm better or more superior, or as if I'm entitled. I'm entitled to more respect or attention or whatever. So that internalized oppression for white people might take the form of internalized privilege. And for people of color, it would be just the opposite. It would be often just taking in a lot of the negative stereotypes and images, all the ways that our history has been exclusive, and just feeling after a while that perhaps you're not as smart or not as beautiful or whatever that might be. So that's the internalized. It's just your own private beliefs and how that shows up inside of you. Once you take that stuff and start interacting with others, you've now jumped a level. You've jumped to the realm of interpersonal racism, because now all your stuff is starting to be acted out with others. And it's not always visible or verbal. Sometimes, just think about yourself walking into this room this morning. Who did you look at or approach or talk to, and what was going on in your head as you saw each different person today? So a lot of it's nonverbal and it's invisible. We don't even know that we have different kinds of bias, but we do. So sometimes it's very subtle in the form of, sometimes stereotypes and prejudices. Sometimes it can be very overt in the form of hate crimes and hate speech, that kind of stuff. So then we jump another level to the institutional, and institutions are made up of people, right? But when our bias, all our individual bias, starts getting collectivized in institutions, institutions themselves can also become biased. So think about institutions, your schools, your law enforcement, your health programs, government offices. All those are institutions that we interact with every day. And a lot of times they can replicate different kinds of patterns that result in discriminatory outcomes. And that doesn't mean they're doing it intentionally. A lot of times it's often, and more often, it's unintentionally, and it's just sort of the routine replication and production of a lot of the kind of racism that just is out there in our society. And we'll talk about the next level a little more on how that operates. But like a school system, again, like that concentrates its students of color in the classrooms or the schools that have the least resources or the least qualified teachers or the least funding compared to white students. That certainly would have some institutional racism going on in that system. So the next concept, and the biggest concept, is structural racism. And this one, if you think of it as the big container that holds all the other forms of racism. So the structure is actually all of the individuals, all of the institutions, and all of the interactions between them. So structural racism is the driver of all the other kinds of racism. We're not born racist. Institutions aren't just created out of the blue as racist. It's because they're part of this container where the fabric of that container, over many years of history and compounding cultural norms and ideas, have resulted in advantaging white people and disadvantaging people